Welcome to Drinks, Jokes, and Storytelling, the ESPN for all things comedy, with your hosts, Mark Riccadonna and Richie Byrne. And now, grab a drink and welcome Mark Riccadonna and Richie Byrne.
Hey, Mark, how are you, sir? How's your day going?
I'm good, man. Welcome to Drinks, Jokes, and Storytelling. I'm your host, Mark Riccadonna, and not with us today is Richie Byrne. It's a good reason. Well, there's Joey Cola is a little under the weather, so he asked Richie to start working for the Drew Barrymore show a little early, so he had to go in and take some meetings, so he will not be joining us this week. He'll be doing warm-up, which is a cool thing. It means the world's opening back up. It means there's work out there to be had, and comedians and artists are going to start working again. Some of us are working, but it's a big fight. So our producer is joining us, Mr. Tom Bannis. Tom, how are you?
I'm good, man. I'm so excited to be here. I mean, the title of the episode is Interviewing Legends, but I feel like these gentlemen are legends of interviewing, right? They've gotten to work with so many people and have been in the business for so long. I think this is a great peek behind the scenes in that.
Well, I had the joke I wanted to say on Richie is it's so great that we're going to have two great interviewers on because maybe we can learn how to do it. Because, Richie and I have our I can't pronounce things, and Richie just really talks about his own stories, no matter who's on.
This is true. But we have another great comedian taking the place, filling in for Richie today.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. But we should bring him out. He does shows here on our channel, and he's a good friend, an old friend of ours. Let's bring out Frank Vignola. Frankie,
hey, what's up? What's up?
How you doing, bud?
Filling in for Richie Byrne, man. Living the dream.
I hope Richie's watching because I'm going to tell you, Frank, if you want to do a good Richie Byrne impression, when I start talking, just roll your eyes and go to your phone.
Right.
That's his go-to.
Here, let's practice that. Go ahead. Okay. Start saying something.
So I had the most amazing week this weekend. I was working on okay, I guess we'll finish that story. You're nailing it. You got us in. But best of luck to Richie on his new endeavor, and he'll be doing some warm-up, which is, I know, one of his favorite things to do. So that's a good thing.
Seriously, can I just say shout out to him because opening for Drew Barrymore, that's a pretty impressive gig.
Yeah, it's a fun time, and he's so good at it. He's such a good warm-up. Yeah. So today, like Tom was saying, we're going to be interviewing guys who have done legendary interviews. And there's a lot of just the list of people on their docket of everything they've done is just so amazing. And if we can just get a tenth of that fun and excitement and the stories, I'm going to be so satisfied.
You know what, Mark? It's amazing because if you look at the list of people that they've interviewed, it mirrors the list of people that won't take my phone call.
But the cool thing about it is that both these guys, we've known each other. We've all known each other for a while, so it's a lot of fun. And I know I'm going to stumble on a lot of stuff and probably say like, oh, tell the story about because I get so excited. You know how I am. I can just sit and listen to people tell stories all day. So let's get this thing kicked off. First, I'm going to bring out this guy. I met him a long time ago. I actually worked on a pilot with him. He was a producer on, and it was a lot of fun. It was called Scoring, and it was awesome. Adam Sykes was on it. Tom Cotter was on it. Spanky was one of the creators of it, and him and I hit it off, and we became friends. And then the more and more I learned about him, the more and more my mind just was like, I cannot believe I was working with this guy. If I would have known his resume then, I probably would have been nervous the entire time. But a good friend of mine, Pete Demas. Everybody, Pete.
Hey, Mark, thank you. And it's really an honor to be here. By the way, you guys are popping my podcast cherry. This is the first podcast I'm ever doing. So thank you so much for having me on the show.
And Pete is joining us from the entertainment capital of the country, Idaho.
Twin Falls.
You're living in Vegas, though, now,
I live in
right?
Vegas. I'm up here to see a friend right now, and it's beautiful out here. It really is.
That's awesome. So Pete left New York. He was in Colorado for a while. You're working on the Stars Network. You were working with them.
Yeah.
And then you went down to Vegas, and it's just been nothing but fun for you.
Yeah, I had 4 shows running in a couple casinos. We did a couple of TV shows out of there, and you were nice enough to guest on a couple of those. And by the way, the audience loves Mark. When he starts his impression of 2 turtles doing it, the whole audience is on the floor dying. It's just fun to watch him win over an audience. He's excellent.
Thank you. Then our next guest, I'll bring him out, and funny circle of the full circle of the entertainment business. I met him through doing stand-up, and always looked up to him, always was so excited. But when I was talking to Pete a couple of times, he brought up this guy's name, not knowing we were friends, and then knowing now that they used to be friends, and we all mutually respect each other. But John Fugelsang's with us. John, how you doing, John?
Hello, greetings from New York. I'm sorry I'm a little late. Joey Cola wasn't feeling well, and someone needed to fill in with his wife, so I just made it back.
Literally fill in.
I'm here to serve.
John, I love your single entendres.
Thank you very much. I've worked on the single entendres. I'm hoping to upgrade to half an entendre by the time. Then I'll be a master at the art form. And by the way, Pete, it's nice to see someone who's visiting Idaho besides the Delta variant this month.
Hey, I got my 2 vaccines, so I'm taken care of.
Nice. I've got 2 so far, but we'll see. I'm in the first world, so I think, sorry, Africa, I want my 3rd.
I'm going for my 3rd Johnson & Johnson, so I should be doing
John,
pretty good.
I have to throw something in here because I saw John at Caroline's one time, and he just killed it when he did Shakespeare's rap. It was the funniest thing I think I've ever seen on stage. Man, that killed that night. That was amazing.
I did a Shakespearean hip hop gangster play called Taming of the Hoe, and
God,
the level I was going for. But
people were on the floor. It was amazingly funny.
Oh, thank you. You should tell Caroline's they'd let me back in the building if they thought you liked it.
I'll call him right after.
Dost thou diss me? Nay, I diss thee not. It was kind of like that. Went on for about 4 hours, but it was good. Thank you.
It was great. It was great.
Hey, Elizabeth, how you doing?
She's impressed at how many Johnsons you took, Mark.
I take a lot of Johnsons. That's how I get booked.
Yeah, that last one, Mark, is mostly just talcum powder, just so you know.
There's one thing. Mark can handle a lot of pricks. He's done it. And it's the people who are afraid of the pricks that are the problem out there. That's why we have to. My whole campaign is to start this campaign that if you don't get vaccinated, you become impotent, and it falls off. And it's get a prick and save one, and that's what I'm working on. So thank you. Here to be served.
I showed up because they said get a prick, and when I showed up, I was like, and a shot? Okay, so it's working out for me.
Right on.
Well, let's dive in because John, you have something really exciting coming up. You're doing a town hall. You're getting back to work.
Oh, yeah.
I would love to hear, tell everybody what you're doing and when it's coming up so we can listen in.
Well, I do a show on Sirius XM, and right before lockdown, they made me an offer I couldn't refuse, and I moved to the Progress channel to do nights, and it was a lot of fun. Our first guest was Pete Townsend, so we thought this is going to be a blast. We're and this is like back in early 2020, right? So the biggest stories in the world, right? Like, oh my God, we're impeaching Donald Trump for trying to extort the president of Ukraine, and vape pens will kill us all. These were the 2 defining stories of early 2020. And then on the 12th, it was my wife's last day at her job. She had given 9 months notice. My child had a birthday in school. It was his last day in school. It was my last day in the studio. And it's been over 18 months since I've seen my coworkers. I've been broadcasting Sirius XM from my apartment here, talking to Julie Andrews and Bernie Sanders. And I just had Ken Burns and George Will, talking to them on the same porn adult hard drive where I talk to you gentlemen now. And next week, this happened over the weekend. I'm going to host a panel, a town hall with little Steven Van Zandt of the E Street Band. In my show before, he had a memoir out. And I told him he was crazy. I'm like, you want to do it on my channel? He's like, I want to do it on Springsteen or on my own. I'm like, you have your own channel. You have GarageBand. Didn't want to do it. So Steve Van Zandt will tell all about his memoir on my show. And it'll be airing on a bunch of other channels. And that'll be next week. So
wow.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
I love it.
I'm working my way through all the E Street Band.
Yeah, you've kind of went through the whole gambit of the E Street Band, right?
Well, Patty Scalf is my dream, but I've had Nils, I've had Steven, I've had Jake Clemens, Gary Talent, and I interviewed Bruce many moons ago when I worked in the salt mines of MTV with Pete.
Wow. And
yeah.
So I guess I would ask, when you had Nils on, you should have had Paul McCartney also on, and then see if the fans could pick out who was who.
You know what? I'll have to book it again just for that reason. I guess, yeah, they do look a little alike, right?
Yeah. I had a it made no sense why I did it. I just did a constant thing on Twitter where I took pictures off the internet and tagged Paul McCartney in them. And I was always getting pictures of Nils and going like, wow, look at Paul McCartney's playing guitar with Bruce Springsteen. Then get nice. Crosby from the Penguins. Oh, look at Paul McCartney's playing for the Penguins now.
By the way, Mark, I think the salt mines of MTV means there's only one beanbag chair and not two.
So, Pete, you and John, are you still with us? I think your audio, but your video.
I am. I just see my browser turned off my camera. I don't know if you can hear me. I'm going to try to turn it back on.
You sound great.
Yeah, we can hear you. That's fine. You can do a talking circle.
I can? Okay. Well, it's actually better looking.
How did you guys both get into doing MTV? Like, because this is, you guys are talking about in the early years of MTV where they actually did music television. Mm-hmm. Like, John, how did you get involved? Were you brought in?
I came a bit later. I grew up watching MTV when it first began, but in the 90s I was doing stand-up. I was just starting out around the time that VH1 was considering losing the hyphen. And this was a big time because they were getting rid of the hyphen between the H and the 1, and they needed someone there to help guide them through this transition period. And I was doing a lot of stand-up. I was doing a show in the Village where I was more or less destroying VH1. I had a monologue where I analyzed the plot of a Michael Bolton video. This is the one for Missing You Now, featuring a young Terry Hatcher. And I just broke down the whole plot, the use of allegory, Kenny G as a Christ figure. He shows up later in it. And the whole thing was just a savage VH1. And eventually I got reviews, and because they used to be papers with reviews in them. And VH1 came to see me, and they said, hey, you want to come work for us for a couple of months? And it lasted for a couple of years. And they hired me to be the comedian who knew a lot about music. But the problem was they were hiring a lot of people who didn't know anything about music. And it wound up being my de facto grad school where I learned broadcasting and learned prompter monkeyism and learned interviewing. And they just kind of threw me in cold. They like, oh, throw the comic in. And so I was really bad in a lot of my interviews, but it taught me what to do and what not to do.
I was going to ask, that was my next question, is how did you discover you were good at doing this?
Oh, I discovered I was bad. I discovered I was bad. Everyone thinks they're going to be good at it. I discovered I was bad, and then I realized, okay, I would like to not embarrass myself as much in this. And so, you pick up little tips like don't flash gang signs, things I wouldn't think of, from where I'm from the streets. But little things like that over time made a lot more sense.
Yeah. I mean, the whole reason we started this podcast with Richie and I was the fact of how much I love listening to people tell stories. And I was trying to figure out an excuse where I get to be like I'm in a green room and I get to hear stories. And that's how the whole podcast started.
Right.
I haven't figured out how to do this shit, so I don't know how you did it in front of a TV camera that's going out to.
Well, storytelling, but storytelling is much more interesting to me than interviewing. You know, like I kind of feel like I do TV for the same reason I had a child and had a colonoscopy, for the material, and it's the only reason to do any of those things. So you know, I like to do a lot of like solo shows and monology. I want to be Spalding Gray when I grow up, and I've done solo shows off Broadway. So like I've only begun trying to like go through all my experiences and find a lot of times you'll have incidents that aren't stories. But when you can, you know, I interviewed Springsteen, it was cool, you know, but like when you can find a beginning, middle, and end to something and actually make it worth sharing, because I have lots of celebrities and I've interviewed a ton of, you know, I mean, rappers and politicians and film directors and what have you. But like, you know, like one time I interviewed George Harrison and Paul McCartney in the same week. Wow. And on different continents. George was in New York with Ravi Shankar on a Wednesday night, hopped on an airplane, took a red eye to London, and did the live special town hall with McCartney in London on the Saturday. And that was amazing. And George changed my life. The George thing, I got him to play guitar. It was his last time he ever performed in public. And the McCartney thing was amazing. McCartney had me host a town hall with him, a live event when he had an album come out once, and I worked with him again. But like you know, my greatest story was when I sort of met Ringo at Sirius X at VH1. Like that, Ringo, not as exciting to me as meeting Paul and George, but I got a better story out of it. So you know, wherever you can find it.
Wow.
You can't leave us on a cliffhanger like that.
But I'm sure Pete has much better stories than me. But,
I don't think so. And by the way, John, you were way too intellectual for MTV, even back in the day.
Yeah.
So
that's what
they were lucky to have you.
All the agents said it while they were weeping. Yeah. You know, yeah. I mean, I guess, you know, Ringo came in one time, and you're very kind, Pete. Thank you. Ringo came in, and I was excited because he was going to host a top 10 countdown of like the top 10 number ones in the British Isles or something. You know, he came in, read prompter. This was mid 90s. I was just starting out. I was really young when Ringo had the long hair and the beard. He looked really cool. He looked really good. And I love Ringo. I have enough solo Beatle records to end a marriage. You know, I have enough Ringo Star solo material to end a marriage. I've seen Bob Dylan 61 times in concert, so to me, it's relatively mild. And so Ringo was coming in, and I didn't have anything to do, but I just wanted to be there that day. And no one cared. I couldn't believe it. It's Ringo. I mean, I saw Ringo at his first ever solo tour back in the late 80s with the All-Star Band, when it was him with Nils Lofgren and Clarence Clemens of E Street Band, and Levon and Rick from the band, and Clarence Clemens and Dr. John, Billy Preston, Joe Walsh, amazing band. And I had the program.
Why not?
You know what? I don't want to bother Ringo, but I want him to sign my program. And so I had to talk to Mitch, was the producer. I don't know if you knew Mitch Adair in your production time, but he was a lovely guy. And I said, Mitch, can I come in? He goes, well, just don't get in the way. Just if you want to talk to Ringo, talk to me first. Okay. Mitch was the boss. I had to respect Mitch. So I come in and I'm watching him tape the show, and I didn't go up to him, didn't talk to him. At one point, I got him a glass of water. He asked for a glass of water, and I brought it to him. And he looked right at me, Ringo, and he said, thanks. And I was like, whoa, you know, I was talking to his managers the whole time. Like, why doesn't he play? Why doesn't he play Don't Pass Me By or Octopus's Garden in concert? He wrote those songs. They're great. What's wrong with this guy? Why doesn't he put those in his set list? And they were like, leave us alone, sir. But eventually, I just wanted my program signed, right? My Ringo program. This is before I met John, before I met Paul and George. So at the end of so I went upstairs, I was chilling, and at the end of the day, I see Mitch, and I'm like, hey, Mitch, where's Ringo? He goes, oh, he left. I'm like, oh, well, where's my program, Mitch? I gave you my priceless Ringo Starr first ever solo tour program, and you said you'd get him to sign it. Where's my program? He goes, oh, hang on. And then he came back and said, I'm sorry, but Ringo took your program with him and left. Wow. And I thought, oh my God, this is how Pete Best felt. This is how Pete Best felt right here. I just had my Beatle merch stolen by an actual Beatle. I said, Mitch, that is not good enough. I demand you get my program back. He goes, I don't want to call Ringo's people. I'm like, dude, you will call Ringo's people right now and get my program back. I called him every day. Do you have my program? Do you have my program? Finally, it got returned. Ringo returned it, and they mailed it to me, and I opened it, and there it was on the front page. He had signed it.
Oh, good.
To Mitch, love Ringo.
Oh.
So that's why he's my least favorite Beatle. Musically, he's the best, but because of that, he's my fourth in terms of a solo career. I also got high with one of the Beatles, but that's a story I can't tell until that Beatle is no longer with us. So, you know.
I have to tell you, I was in Liverpool doing another story for MTV when national news in the U.S. had came out and said that our current generation back there in the 90s couldn't name all four Beatles. So I took a camera crew after we were done shooting into a bar that was famous for having the Silver Beatles play there with Pete Best. Okay. Now you got to remember, on the back wall of this interview that I'm doing is a giant photograph of the Silver Beatles. Okay. And I pulled all these people from Liverpool in front of the camera to ask them to name all four of the Beatles, and about 75% of them left George out.
Wow.
Oh,
They couldn't name George. It was just a real funny thing to do at the time, and it was just wow.
Wow. I used to be upset at people who couldn't name all the Beatles until I had a president who couldn't name the three branches of government. After that, after a reality show guy becomes president and can't name the three branches, I'm not even kidding. He couldn't do that.
And that's not even including Bush.
Yeah. I mean, well, look, Trump's there to make Bush look better, and Bush was there to make his father look better. It's the circle of incompetence.
So, real quick, I want to get into a little Pete's background for anybody tuning in. So, Pete, how did you get involved at MTV? You were there at the early days.
Yeah, it's not that sexy, but I'll tell a quick version. Dave Cerolnik, who is the executive producer of MTV News, he first came through CNN when I was working there, and he did the story on the Aerosmith and Run DMC video being made. And it was the first piece he ever edited, and I cut it with him. And it was an amazing story, as you know. It's timeless even today. And shortly thereafter, Dave ended up getting the position he did at MTV. And he came over and he asked me if I could basically build an edit suite and manage cutting The Week in Rock, our weekly news show, by myself. And if he could, they would green light that program. So I came in, designed and built the edit suite, and that was in May of 1988. And we basically launched the weekly show and the first real regular production of MTV News besides the VJs in the studio. And later on, I just kept climbing the ladder, becoming a producer, executive producer. I did rock docs, rockumentaries for a long time. And then I worked with Lauren Lazen, all of this under Linda Corradina, who was an amazing executive.
Yes.
I love her. She's an amazing person. And nurtured the best talent out of all of us. And Lauren Lazen as well was great to work with. We did a lot of specials with her. She did stuff like Sex in the 90s. You might remember that series, and she's very creative. And then I ended up taking an executive position, kind of running the library and distributing it on video and DVD for them around the world. And so it was a very, healthy trajectory through the company. And I think back to all those great people I worked with, Doug Herzog and Judy McGrath. They're irreplaceable, and never anywhere I ever worked afterwards could you find executives of that caliber again. They were just the best people to work for. Absolutely. So I miss them dearly. Yeah.
Now we were talking a tiny bit about politics in there, but you did a documentary with Kurt Loder about basically the crime and punishment of drug use around the world.
Yeah, it was very controversial. And we had gone to Liverpool at that point where I told you earlier, because there was a doctor in Liverpool who was using the Medical Act of 1858, which really said that a doctor in England can use anything in the pharmacopoeia as treatment, and if it's deemed to be unethical for any reason, he can only be drawn up against a panel of his own peers. And England had done that when they saw what was happening with the opium wars in the United States, where doctors were being put in jail by lay people, non-medical people. So this doctor then decided that heroin had run amok so bad in Liverpool and the crime was so terrible. His clinic was right next door in the town called Widnes. He ended up prescribing pharmaceutical heroin to his patients. Now, the thing is, it's not all that sexy, all right, because you have to then be completely clinicalized. You have to have examinations. You have to subject yourself to therapies and group therapies and really be clinicalized. And what that meant was that it destroyed the entire pyramid of sales, right? So no longer was it required for someone to sell heroin to support their own habit. The use of heroin in town went crashing down. Crime was at a hugely reduced rate. He was tremendously successful, and a few years after my story, they shut him down. So,
wow,
yeah,
holy crap! No,
so it was a very moving piece. I worked with a young woman who was 18 years old. She told a story that was practically a tear-jerking experience, just working with her and hearing what her life was like. And we did that for every single drug, cocaine, marijuana, ecstasy, LSD, a little bit of a history, a little bit of how we got to regulate everything through law and stop treating people like they had an addiction or an illness or an ailment and started to throw them in jail. And it was really controversial at the time because there was a couple of groups that started a grassroots fax campaign. Remember faxes? Yes. A fax campaign against the company. So they jammed up all the machines at MTV with faxes complaining about the show, claiming that we were showing children how to do drugs, basically. And
so, Pete, I got to ask, which was your favorite drug to use?
I'm not that experienced, except I've never been afraid of a little cannabis. Let's put it that way.
I wanted to ask, did you cover cannabis back then? And now since they're changing the law?
We did the whole thing. Harry Anslinger, how it all began. We had footage of the original anti-marijuana films that they made, Reefer Madness. We went through the whole thing. I think the most rewarding experience for me in that whole special was there was a Grateful Dead fan who was following the group for years. And, at one point in time in the Midwest, his van broke down and he needed to replace the van. In the meantime, there was this narc who was posing as a fan from city to city who would constantly see this young man and ask him if he could help him find some LSD. This young kid had nothing to do with LSD that in terms of dealing it or anything. He didn't really know. But when his van broke down and this guy approached him again, by the way, this narc was smoking J's with him and befriending him, He finally said to the narc, he said, look, I need $300 to repair my transmission. If I help you find somebody to get you your LSD, would you pay me $300? And he said, yeah. So, of course, he hooked him up with the guy. And would you believe the narc asked for enough LSD to keep a high school high for 10 years? Right. So under mandatory minimums, this kid was doing close to life.
Jesus.
Wow.
For $300.
But think of all the LSD crimes that were stopped that day. Think of all the violent assault and battery, all the attacks and rapes and armed robberies people commit while on LSD that didn't happen that day. So at least think of all the prog rock people didn't listen to that day. At least all the prog rock that wasn't listened to that day.
His name was Christian Martinson, and about 8 months after the show aired, they quietly released him. And one day I'm at work and I get a phone call from Christian, and he is crying on the telephone, telling me that the only reason why he's free is because of me.
I so wanted the punchline of that story to be a Donald Trump pardon.
Good one, Frank. Anyway, I don't want to get too wordy here, but it was very rewarding to know that expose brought to light the real injustice around what that case held, and the kid was freed, and it was kind of rewarding.
Wow, that's powerful stuff, man. You guys, so you're both you're doing more on the production side. John's doing more on the on-camera side. But we talked a little bit about Springsteen, and I wanted to bring up to Pete, because you also you've done a little work with the Springsteen crew.
Yeah, I think it's best to start with John because he's more recently worked with the band.
Okay.
I don't know if I have any stories per se. I've interviewed a lot of them, and when I met Springsteen, the one time I really met him was amazing because it was at Tramps, and he was just guesting with Joe Grishecki. He would produce Joe Grishecki's record. Joe is a special ed teacher in Jersey who rocks with the band at night, and Springsteen loves him, and he's a terrific guitarist and singer and songwriter. And so Bruce was coming out at a Grishecki show, and I made him laugh at a MTV joke, but like I was just a kid. I mean, I was like 20, I don't know, and I was so in awe of how normal and just how real he was. What surprised me though was like a year later at the Grammys, he said hi to me. I couldn't believe he remembered me. And I guess maybe he watched VH1 at the time. I don't know. But I was a huge fan. I've never had him on my Sirius XM show because he has his own channel, of course. But I am working my way through the band. I'm working my way through every member of his band eventually. But I'm sure you work with them much more closely than I ever did.
Well, first of all, you should know that Kurt Loder did the interview for the Rock Doc, and whatever interview I did with him for the Fox special, it was kind of short. But we did a life-spanning interview with him with Kurt that I produced. And I think it's really important to say that, there's an old saying, music is played by those who are saved by it. I'm pretty sure if Bruce didn't have music, he'd be dead.
Wow.
I mean, he is just, his music and him are just, yeah, he's blue polo. Notice that. That's really funny. But, he has a lot of soul for a white guy. Let's just say that.
Oh, yeah.
Man, he is one deep person, and it's really great to be around him. You can see that when he goes on stage, it's transformative. It's not an act. He draws this life force off the audience that he doesn't carry with him off stage. It's his purpose. It's what he's here for. And it was just remarkable being able to work so closely with somebody that was one of my gods of rock for, my whole life, and I was very honored to be with him, and do that stuff. We did, I think it's also important to mention John Landau, because, this man is an incredible person behind the scenes. A lot of people don't know about him, but the relationship, the importance of the relationship between John Landau and Bruce Springsteen is just never talked about enough. John is an intellectual. He is brilliant. He's a rock critic and a journalist, but he is really, he brings so much to Bruce's frame. He frames Bruce's talent. He is such an amazing force behind the man, and no one ever talks about him, but he's just an incredible. I mean, I wish I had a John Landau. I would be doing something amazing if I had someone like that for a manager.
Now, go ahead, Tom.
Oh no, I was going to ask. So you guys have had so many incredible experiences with so many diverse artists. When was the first time when you early on? Did you meet somebody that you were blown away by? Were you ever, maybe you weren't, but were you ever like, I can't believe I'm getting to work with this person? Or
Bruce is definitely one. Yeah, Bruce was one of them. I think the only time I was really smitten by an artist was Janet Jackson. God, she was just the cutest, most wonderful person to interview. I felt like stealing her, like grabbing her and running away with her.
John can give you some tips on that.
Janet Jackson was just, lovable. That's all I can really say. Just lovable. Mm-hmm. I was lucky enough to work closely with Madonna, and I think we have a good story about Aerosmith later. But I think it was different back then. We didn't run around taking pictures and selfies with artists. We didn't do that. We were trying to stay in a professional realm with them. We never assumed that they were our friends. We were there to do a job. And they were often very nervous, as you'll hear from the story about Aerosmith later. They're very nervous when you're around because you have the power of media, especially back then, that can completely affect them in ways that they don't want. So they have a lot of concerns, and you have to win over their trust. There's always a process to winning over trust.
Now, it's interesting you said that, though, Pete, that about like taking selfies and stuff. A lot of people don't understand, because I worked the door at Stand Up New York, and they all want to, well, didn't you get pictures with that person? Why wouldn't you have taken pictures with that person?
It crosses the line.
Yeah, I've never felt comfortable being able to be. I mean, now it's so readily available, because I guess because of phones, that it's not as weird. But back then there wasn't cameras on the phone, so it was like, hey, can you hold on? I'm going to run to the drugstore and get a camera, a disposable camera, so I can take a picture with you.
Yeah, but even still now, I feel like I got into a really good celebrity realm with my business, right? But you can't, like, if you take a picture with a celebrity, even your friends that are celebrities, like, what are you, a groupie now? So you like, you don't do it. So you almost need a photographer on site and become friendly with them, and they take the picture. Now it's not out of place.
It's changed, I think. Go ahead, Frank. Sorry.
No, I was just also going to ask. This is also kind of a technology thing where now you can do it on your phone with a selfie versus back in the day, you used to have the disposable camera and you had to be on the other side of the line. So maybe somebody was 6, 7, 8 feet away trying to snap something versus now actually walking up to someone and asking them if you can get a selfie. It has to have something to do with the technology now as well, doesn't it?
Wait, so I got a great little sidebar. I'm doing a party for Jay-Z and Beyonce, right? So I'm doing all to run a show with it. So now everybody's contact point is really me in it. So somebody went up to the photographer and was like, hey, can you take a picture of Blue Ivy with Jay? And it's his family. This is all his family members in this event. The photographer takes the picture. Jay-Z sees it out of the corner of his eye, runs over, like beelines at him. He's like, listen, he's like, I don't care about taking pictures of me and my wife. He's like, not the kids. The guy froze. He's like, So he comes to me and he's like, listen, that picture wasn't for me. That wasn't my cell phone. I'm not being a creep. Like, somebody's aunt or cousin or something asked me to take this picture. I didn't get to convey that. Could you please tell them I want to be able to work with them again? So I went to my point person. She's like, no, Beyonce chose this guy specifically to take the pictures. He's not in trouble. Don't worry about it. Like, it's fine. You could let it pass. But it was such a weird, even inside that realm, it's like, it's a work environment. It was a family event, but it's still a work environment. So the people that are working can't just bust out a phone with all this non-disclosure stuff, I feel like. But sorry, John,
it crosses a line when you're there to do something for a network and you're trying to pop off a selfie with, even with a disposable camera. It totally crossed the line, and it kind of blows your relationship a little bit with them because you're supposed to be on the other side of that line with them.
Yeah.
Anyway,
you regret it sometimes when you miss it.
John's in a little bit of a different camp though, because I imagine you have to take photos for promo.
Yeah, I was going to say it's really changed now. When they come to do Sirius XM, it used to be the same way. It would be considered gauche to do that yourself. Although I once was with a regular camera took a selfie with McCartney on stage at Hammerstein Ballroom, and it seems so quaint now that I did it with a camera. I couldn't even tell how he looked. But now at Sirius, it's a whole different. It's all promotion. And there's like a selfie stuff as well. So like what I have found is, we take a picture with the celebrity and a lot more people will listen because that gets flashed on social media. And then more people listen on the app or on demand or listen to it live if it's a pre-tape. So it's sort of been a 180 for me. I grew up in much the same way. You would have the photographer on set do the pictures. Now it's just part of the gig that, like, I always ask permission in advance because sometimes they don't want. But, if it's someone that I think will help, because my show has a Facebook page, that's how you drive traffic. That's the internet now. It's a whole different way of ratings. It's a whole different way of getting clicks and eyeballs.
John, do you feel that like the line has also been blurred a bit by how popular reality television has become?
Well, I'd just like to add, it's the same with the sex tapes. It used to be totally unprofessional with celebrities, but now if I have a sex tape with a celebrity in me, I have to post it because it helps both of our careers.
Well, Kim Kardashian got famous from a sex tape, and now she produced Paw Patrol,
Yeah.
The new movie.
Isn't that great? A sex tape with Ray J can lead to the cover of Vogue. Don't tell me the American dream is dead, gentlemen. A sex tape with Ray J.
A children's movie. Like,
yeah.
That's crazy to me.
Well, I don't know what to say. Kanye loves big asses. I don't know what I mean. Yeah. He likes Trump too for the same reason. But yeah.
That went south in a hurry.
But no, I mean, but the rules have all changed, and what looked grubby, a decade ago, now is just what you have to do. No one talks about ratings; they talk about eyeballs and clicks, and drawing traffic. So it keeps my selfie game has gotten very good. By the way, I've had to learn how to do that in ways I would never. I live with a bunch of photogenic people. I'm not a photogenic person, but I've had to learn how to very good. So, but I don't know, to answer your question. I don't know. I mean, like, I always think I'm never going to get intimidated again, because when I was very young, I worked with Harrison and McCartney. I would never want to interview Bob Dylan. I couldn't handle it. But like, I've worked with Julie Andrews and Dick Gregory. And I mean, I've had everyone from Regina King to Nick Nolte to Anthony Bourdain to, wow. I mean, it's been kind of amazing. I've had someone I know die every week the last 3 weeks in a way, because Michael K. Williams and Ed Asner and did my show many times, and Norm, and so I'm glad the pictures are there now. I used to be embarrassed that I had to do it for work, and now I'm glad that they're there, because it's how we interact today, and it would be weird in today's media marketplace if I didn't do that kind of stuff.
Can I ask another question real quick, Mark?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So I've noticed for myself, like, I am not overwhelmed by big name comedians, but I'll be overwhelmed by a big name musical person or a big name actor, like somebody outside of my field. Do you guys experience that as well, where if it's somebody slightly outside of your wheelhouse, it might be a little bit more of a wow thing than somebody within your specific industry?
What do you mean? Like, how so?
Like, for example, would Mike Wallace be like, holy crap, that's Mike Wallace, since you also do interviews?
Oh, I see.
Or does it not matter?
Well, I never ran into Ed Bradley, but when Kurt and I would
Don Lemon. What if he's bumped into Don Lemon?
Well, I mean, whenever Kurt and I were doing stories, one of my favorite one is we would say, what would Ed Bradley do? So I think maybe if I met Ed Bradley or something, I could have that sort of a moment. But the funny story that goes with that was that we were sitting in a coffee house in Amsterdam, and we were at the point in our drug story of showing people how it works in Amsterdam where it's legal. So I sat down with Kurt and I said, look, we got to show how people buy marijuana here. And he says to me, well, what would Ed Bradley do? And I looked at him and I said, well, he'd get on camera and he'd go up there and buy some. And he goes, okay, let's do it. And he got up and we went and shot him and he went and bought, cannabis. But yeah, I think there are certain news people I used to look up to a lot, but nowadays not so many.
Well, John,
is Bradley your guy you look up to?
Yeah, he's one of them for sure. Yeah, Mike Wallace, another one. Yeah, I used to really admire those guys.
How about you, John?
Yeah,
just guys you love hearing their interviews.
I mean, I've had interviewers on my show and I've had journalists on my show. And I've worked in cable news. I mean, I've done a lot of my time in CNN and Fox and MSNBC as an on camera, and I worked at CNN for a while. It's funny. I just had George Will on my show for the first time last week, and he's someone who's rubbed me the wrong way my entire life. I remember my dad reading George Will and being annoyed, but loving him as a writer. Yep. As a teenager, I was annoyed and loved him as a writer. He came on the show last week, and I couldn't believe what a fanboy I was. I was so embarrassed. I'm like, I have been disagreeing with you since Reagan was president. And now he's 80. And I just realized I have spent so much time reading this guy and saying, well, he gets a point there. He's a sane conservative, at least. And it was totally delightful. I asked him, what hip hop meant to him. And I actually defended the lyrics of the Rolling Stones' Satisfaction to George Will just last week. But it was funny because he was someone that I just kind of thought, okay, I'm not going to get in a fight with this guy. I wound up just talking to him like, oh my God, I'm talking to George Will in my planetarium guest room lighting about, you know, rock and roll and politics. And it was such an unexpected thrill. And that's the thing about these interviews. You know, they're all at a certain point, like, you know, all these names, you know, all these celebs, done them 100 times, and you never know until you're sitting there, like, when someone's going to be unexpectedly thrilling. And I've had guests come in who I was like, okay, well, this will just, you know, fine, Rita Moreno. And then I just fell in love with Rita Moreno. And now she's on my show 3 times and I'm in awe of her when I see her. You know, sometimes you have to meet these people in person to really get a sense of why they're special in the first place.
Right. I have to say, though, I did neglect to mention, and this is going to really date me. I'll wait till this car goes by. This is going to really date me, but really the only time I was really sort of overwhelmed with that sensation was when I did a rockumentary with Yes. And, you know, those guys are truly intellectual musicians. They're right out of the art schools of London. You know, they have been through the entire evolution of rock and roll. I was lucky enough to have a birthday party with John. Oh my God, I can't remember his name. Who's the lead singer again? Anderson. I was going to say Andrews because you said Julie Andrews. And breakfast with Bill Buford, which was absolutely brilliant. I mean, here you're having breakfast with this man, and he's discussing how money is a sense of paper applause, and he's talking about the industry like he's apart from it. And you know, these guys were just so amazing, and to be able to work with them after listening to their music for all those years, I was starstruck with them for sure. Chris Squire, absolute genius, brilliant man. So sorry when he died. Only 2 artists passed away, and I cried. John Lennon and Chris Squire. When he died, I cried. It's the only 2 people.
Wow. I guess I'll just throw mine out there. I don't know if you guys know him. He's not hugely famous. I can't believe he's not more famous, but Bob Edwards. He used to do Weekend with Bob Edwards.
Oh yeah, of course.
He is, to me, I could listen to that guy. He could interview Garbage Man for an hour and I could listen to it. And the other one is surprisingly Alan Alda. I can't believe how good he is.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. He's done my show a few times, and Alan Alda, I saw him filming a movie when I was 17 and moved to New York City, and I watched him directing a movie in Washington Square Park. And I mean, I was always in awe of him. And then you meet him in person and you're like, I've only had that happen a few times. And one of the weirdest times for me was Al Gore, who I worked with. I worked for him. He was my boss at Current TV, where I worked for like a year and a half. And like, I just thought, okay, I'm going to, you know, okay, I'll work with Al Gore tonight, whatever. But then he walks in the room, and it was the same feeling I had when I met 3 of the Beatles. It was like, oh my God, you're Al Gore. You're just this abstract thing from the TV to me. But then you're like sitting there on camera realizing, oh my God, you're history. You are a part of history. And it's something that like is really hard to get used to. Nick Nolte did that for me when I met him. Talib Kweli did that for me when I met him. DMC. Really? Yeah, DMC and Julie Andrews. Like, it's weird which ones hit me. And you know, but yeah, it's kind of fun. Celebrity is really the dumbest thing humans have ever invented. So, you know, I'm like, that alone doesn't impress me. But I've had the experience many times of meeting artists who were famous, who it was a job. I didn't respect them. I wasn't a fan. I did it because I had to do it. And then I became a fan because I met them.
I have another question real quick, Mark. So what do you guys think of the general sort of theory that here in the States, celebrity is royalty versus abroad where there is actual royalty?
I think it's true.
I think it's true. Yeah.
You think it's true?
I find it really interesting. And you watch like BBC shows and you watch American shows, and it's like America's all about the aesthetic, what they look like. Mm-hmm. And in the British shows, they might not be the prettiest people, but they're so talented that you know why they got the part. And I find it so interesting that it's like, oh my God, we do not at all care if you're actually really good at what you do. It's, do you look good doing what you do?
Right.
Well, you don't have to be good at what you do to be royalty either.
Yeah, that's true.
That's very true. Very true.
You know what I mean?
You have to be good at anything to be royalty. Just
Right.
Lucky
You just
Lucky
have to-
Sperm Club. That's it.
You
One
just have to
sperm
go-
has to be good at
you
one
just-
thing, and then you're set.
You just have to go far enough back to somehow be related to Germans, and you're fine.
Now, when you guys are like working with your heroes, you know, somebody that you've looked up to or whatever, and you're having that, like you were talking about, like the fanboy moment, is there something you technically do, or like Pete, when you're interviewing or, you know, setting up a rockumentary with a band you've listened to over the years? Do you have a technique of like keeping your cool, or do you tell them like, look, I'm sorry, I'm freaking out a little. I'm a huge fan of you.
First of all, you know, you're always nervous when you're going to meet one of your idols because they can only blow it, right? So you're always a little nervous about it, you know. I would be petrified to meet Bob Dylan, you know. Like,
I will never want to meet Bob. Yeah.
Because he's so amazing, and some people say, you know, whatever, his music sucks now, and it's like, once you're as great as Bob Dylan, you don't ever have to do anything again, and you're still great, you know what I mean? So that's one thing. You're a little nervous about it, but the other thing is I never, ever, ever allowed a pre-interview. In other words, the manager or the artist, and usually it was the manager, would ask what the interview is going to be like. And I would only ever give the broadest strokes. And the reason is because when you sit down with them, you lose all the freshness if they have sort of precognition of what the question is going to be. And really what you want is impulsive reactions, honest reactions. And you have to frame your questions for that in order to get that from them. And you really want to encourage them to loosen up and have confidence in you. One of my examples is, you know, I did a short interview way back when Bruce was on tour for the Born in the USA tour. He was, John Landau was there, and we did a brief interview with him. And actually, I'm sorry, that was a different time when I did him. But anyway, I asked John Landau, I said, tell me something about Bruce that nobody else knows. Oh, he goes, I can't tell you. I can't do that. And I'm like, what do you mean you can't do it? It's a real easy question. He goes, no, I can't. And I'm like, you know, so I said to him, see, now you're making it something that it's not. That's not a risky question. You're turning it into that. So he thinks for a second. He goes, okay, I got it. And he goes, I'll tell you what I can tell you. No one knows. In all my life, I've never seen Bruce Springsteen drink a cup of coffee. And so in a way, what you're trying to do with these people, if artists or managers or anything else, is get them off their guard. Stop thinking that you're digging for dirt. Just have a conversation. You know what I mean? And I think that was a really good example of where I got him to sort of kind of back down a little bit and realize it's a very innocent question. You don't have to make it dirty, you know?
Yeah. Now, who was one of the, and I don't want to ask this because I don't want to ask a question where you dig in the dirt, but have you ever had a like big dud, you know, where you're going into an interview and it's something bad? Like I know Pete has the Pearl Jam story that I found very interesting, but have you had somebody on that you were so geared up for and then it was,
Well,
I know that's tough because you might not want to name names.
Yeah, I have to apologize because this is one of the things that make Idaho a very special and nice place. I'm just pulled up on the side of the road here where I get a good cell phone signal. But this gentleman stopped to make sure that my car wasn't stuck and that see if I needed help. I want you to know that I've seen people step over dead bodies in New York City on the sidewalk. Okay. So, I mean, Idaho is a lovely state, man. There's some really nice people out here. Just wanted to say that. What was your question again?
I was talking about, and then, you know, I know you have like the Pearl Jam story, which could segue into this, but like an interview that you were so excited for, and then something happened that kind of let it down, or to, you know, you weren't allowed to ask a certain question, or.
I think, well, Pearl Jam is kind of a dud story, to be honest with you, because we had gone to Seattle. MTV had a New Year's Eve special they were taping, And it was the last performance that Kurt Cobain did for us before he passed away. And I had the opportunity to do a rock documentary on Pearl Jam or Kurt Cobain and Nirvana. And I chose Pearl Jam at the time. And I flew in a film crew, a 3-camera film crew. We went to the OK Hotel, which is a very famous place that was in the movie Singles. And it's where these guys played a lot in the beginning, back in the day. And he didn't show up. The rest of the band was there and the manager, and everybody was waiting around for him. And he never showed up. And so what we decided to do, since we were so in deep, was we just decided to lock up the theater and just say, look, if you drag him out from under a table drunk in the middle of the night, call us up and we're going to come back and do this interview, you know? And then I went back to the hotel room, and in the room next door to me was a producer by the name of Rick Hankey doing an interview with Kurt Cobain, which would be his last interview for MTV.
Wow.
And I went in to check up on Rick to make sure everything was going well. And it was really a sort of a bare bones shoot in a hotel room. So nothing really fancy, which seems horrible when I had all this money invested in Pearl Jam and have them not show up. And when I walked in the room, the baby's name was Frances Bean. Frances Bean was an infant, and, they carried her around nude all the time. They didn't keep diapers on her. So she just wheedled on the chair. And so Courtney has the baby, and she's walking right towards me with the baby dripping urine in a nude towards the front door of the hotel room. And Kurt rips off his microphone and jumps up to follow her right in the middle of the interview. And I swear to God, this is what he said as they ran into the bathroom together. He said, honey, I know I said I wouldn't do any more sunglasses interviews, but did you see the lights in there? And the door slams, and then they start arguing in the bathroom. And I look at poor Rick and I ask him, how's it going? And he is just looking at me like, oh my God, you know? So I go down in history as making the absolute worst call in rock doc history, I think, by picking Pearl Jam. The thing was that they blew off our entire taping that night, which, by the way, was an amazing show, that New Year's Eve show, because, that was the In Utero album for Nirvana. Right. And they killed, that was a great performance and they killed it. But what made it really hard was that Tom Freston had already been in the media saying that he was a huge Pearl Jam fan. And he really loved them. And so in a way, this was a big slap in the face, I think, to us as a network. And it kind of tainted the entire event for us quite a bit. And I remember sitting there watching Nirvana perform, and Judy McGrath was next to me, and I could see she was, troubled by the fact that we got stood up by Pearl Jam. And I tried to reassure her by saying, look what's happening on stage. You have an amazing show. You have it, you have your show. But somehow it didn't make up for the personalization of that stand-up. It was hard. That was a hard one for us to take, and came right across the network,
Yeah. First off, Bob Dylan makes great music now. Bob Dylan's last album is fantastic. It is a classic. He makes great music. But I would still never, he's the one person that, I've seen him many times. I stood next to him on a sidewalk once and made eye contact. I never want to talk to him. But like one thing I learned is these people have to do this over and over and over again, right? If they're promoting something, they've done it 100 times. They've been asked the same questions 100 times, usually by prompter monkeys with note cards who don't even know what they're doing. So many times if I've been promoting a project or a TV thing and I got to go into a room and I just see the person with note cards and I know this person doesn't know anything about me, or they're letting me come here and use their airtime. So if you can make the interview interesting, that's great. And when George Harrison came on, I knew that if I talked about the Beatles, that he'd get up and leave. So I talked about God and death and what happens when you die, and the soul and meditation. And he wound up staying for 4 hours. And we gave him a guitar, and he played 4 songs that he had never played live. And it wound up being the last time he played in public. And I think it was because I was such a bad interviewer that he liked the rawness of it. The first time William Shatner did my Sirius XM show, I tried something similar. I began the whole thing by saying, we're now in the golden age of director's cuts of movies. And with all that's possible with digital technology, the one film I can think of that most deserves a director's cut is Star Trek V, which is the one film Shatner has directed. It's considered the worst of all the Star Trek films. It's a mess. In fairness, it was done during the writer's strike, and there was like a special effects technician strike in Hollywood at the time. So it had a lot of factors against it. Lawrence Luckenbill is very good in it, but it's a weird movie. It's about God and Spock's brother, and it's you know. So I said, you know, with all that you could do digitally, why can't Paramount just give you the money and let you recut it? William Shatner lit up. Someone finally found a subject that he wanted to talk about. And he went off into all the reasons why that movie failed and why it was not his fault and everything that could have gone wrong with it. And after that, he trusted me. Wow. And he knew I wasn't a Muppet. And he opened up so much. I got him to tell a very moving story about how Leonard Nimoy had tried to do an intervention for his wife before she took her own life. And we talked about addiction. We talked about AA. We talked about how Nimoy had tried to save her. And People Magazine ran a whole article on that conversation. And it happened because I talked about the worst movie ever made. Because I talked about Star Trek V, and I knew that would open a door in his brain. It wasn't going to be the same old William Shatner. He gets asked the same stuff all the time. And I found a new way to do it, a new thing for him to talk about. And that's one thing that I've learned. If you know what they love, if you know what they're passionate about, if you can turn on their brains and make it fun for them, then you'll get a better interview. And it doesn't matter what they're going to talk about whatever the product they're promoting is on every other interview, right? Every junket, everything they do, they're going to talk about this movie, this TV show, this album. So find the thing that no one asks them about and let them really want to talk about something, and then you'll have a more fun conversation.
Not the same old questions. Exactly.
So my most awkward, I've had many where they were dead, but like it was Brian Wilson. Brian Wilson agreed to do my show. I couldn't believe it. And Love and Mercy had just come out. In fact, I had just gone to see the movie that morning. And I went to a 10:30 show, the earliest show I could find in Manhattan, to see the biopic. And then I was going to race to the studio and have some lunch. And then Brian Wilson would come in the afternoon. Well, Brian Wilson came in the morning, and he was only giving one-word answers to questions. He was unhappy, Brian Wilson, just giving one-word answers, sullen. And they called me saying, "You got to get here right now." I'm like, "Why?" They said, "Because you got to interview Brian Wilson now. He's here now, and he's done all the interviews already. He didn't give them anything. They all gave up after 5 minutes." So I went in there armed with as many questions that could be answered in just one word as possible. I was in the taxi just writing down something he could answer because he was bored, and he's a genius and everything bores him, and I get it. And so finally I said to him, I just rattled him off. I'm like, but I had an angle. I was like, "What's it like for you as a producer using Pro Tools now in a digital facility compared to the 70s? I found his autistic.
I was going to say, that's his nerd.
And he talked a lot more about tech stuff I didn't understand. And finally I said to him, "Do you believe in God?" And he stared at me and he said, "I believe music is God and the piano keyboard is my church." And I was like, "We got our soundbite, dude. The rest is just filler." I knew I had it.
Wow.
Because it's boring. The bigger the celebrity, the more boring this sort of thing is for them. Unless they're like a McCartney or a Barack Obama, and they can be on all the time. So, that's something that I've learned about it. You've got to just make it interesting or fun for them.
Does that register with you? Like when the soundbite happens, like when you're like, that's the sentence of the interview. Both of you, is that the sentence of the interview where it's like that resonates? You like,
oh yeah, you hear the sound bites as they come off their lips. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have a question too. Do you also, John, when you do that kind of thing, you get a sense, oh, Shatner, it's going to be ego. Wilson, it's going to be nerd. Like, do you get like a sense of where that trapdoor might be?
No, I mean, it's always ego for most of them anyway. And, you just gotta, they don't want. I mean, you can be obsequious and just flatter them, and they'll be bored and they'll do it. And you see a lot of guys and women do this. They just compliment them, and it's like dating someone who just compliments you all the time. It's boring and uninspiring. So you've really got to think about what questions have they been asked 1,000 times, and what is going to be fun for them, and what's going to be boring for them to talk about. I had Ken Burns on my show last week, and I wanted to say, is your whole life walking around people telling you the subjects that you should make documentaries for the Ken Burns movie they want Ken Burns to make? And he loved it, and he talked all about it. So it's like, I just try to find an angle that like in a stand-up set, you'll try to find your take on an issue, right? Whatever the topic of the thing is, what's my take? Right. I try to find a perspective that they haven't been asked about, and that usually but also if they know you're not a Muppet. A lot of times, like, rappers will look at me, and I mean, I look like John Wick during a Moroccan oil shortage. It's tragic. When I look, and they'll look at me and think, "Oh God, who's this Caucasian simpleton?" And then they'll realize, "Oh, you're not a complete Muppet," and they'll open up and enjoy it. So, a lot of it is just letting them know that they're not talking to an imbecile, because I've done it, man. I've done these TV and radio shows where they haven't, and I have a difficult last name, so I know who's a fraud if they're interviewing me. And so it's just it's something that I never set out to be good at, but I got tired of being bad at it. And so over the years, I started to try to learn some tricks to make it easier.
So with Ken Burn, what a good question to be to go the other, and I'm trying to learn from you, actually, to be honest with you. So what a good question to be to go the other way around and be like, okay, no matter how much money they backed up, what would you never do a documentary about? Like, no matter how much money was on the truck, what would you just no, not interested.
With him, it's like, because, he gets offered this from Netflix all the time, but he likes to have full directorial control and everything he releases with PBS. He has to raise his own money, but he gets full directorial control. So what I asked him instead was, because his new Muhammad Ali movie is great. And I said, this soundtrack has Beyonce and it has the Beatles on it. And I was like, what's it like? It's so nice to see a Ken Burns movie with contemporary music. Yeah. And boom, he doesn't ever, I said nothing against the Shokin Farewell, which is the theme from the Civil War. And he loved that I knew the name of the Civil War theme, that he just opened up and we talked all about music the whole time. And I mean, go ahead.
You see what John just did there was he nicely said to me, no, that wouldn't be a good question.
Well, no, it probably would be a good question, but like, I did my research on him and I know what his deal is. And I knew that, like, he didn't care about the money. He makes enough money. He's Ken Burns. He cares about the directorial control. So I referenced to him, that I love your deal with PBS, that you get the full director's cut. But I pivoted this way, Frank. I said, do you ever go back and watch your movies and just think, oh God, that edit sucked. I wish I could do that again. Like, is the fact that you get to do the director's cut the first time harder for you long term? It's inside baseball stuff.
Right.
We did a 44-hour movie about. But it's all about just finding the thing that they haven't been asked 100 times.
And out of all of them, the documentary about the Brooklyn Bridge, it's so poetic. Have you ever? It's
beautiful.
It's just such a beautiful.
I told him.
I think it's just a single episode, right?
The Congress, the Mark Twain. It's a one shot. But I told him. I began it by telling him that I had met him before. I met him in green rooms. We had met before. He knew who I was. But I told him that before my dad died, I bought my dad a DVD copy of Unforgivable Blackness, the Jack Johnson story. We watched it together, and how much my dad loved that film. And in many ways, I think this Ali film is a sequel to that.
Right.
And that was it. He knew I got it. He knew that I wasn't a twit. He knew that I knew Jack Johnson and his previous work. And half the time, it's just putting them at ease in that way.
Right. Yeah.
Well, Ken Burns is amazing. Let's all just agree to that.
Agreed.
He's all right.
Yeah.
I had you guys for over an hour, and I can't thank you enough for giving your time here. And Pete, you're going to join us tomorrow with the Moscow Peace Music Festival. You're going to talk about that a little bit. I'm really excited about that. We'll be joined with Don Jameson, so make sure you guys tune in. It's like an MTV VH1 themed week here at Drinks, Jokes, and Storytelling. So before we go, I think John, I think you're going to get a kick out of it. Pete has one of my favorite stories, and I remember sitting with you in traffic in Vegas, and you were telling me the story, and I was going, this has to get on Drinks, Jokes, and Storytelling. It's, to me, one of the greatest ever. I don't even know how to set it up, how to segue you in, so I'm just going to ask you to tell us from start to end the Aerosmith story.
It's a great story, and they are truly one of the greatest of all rock and roll bands. And I do mean that they are the coolest in so many ways. But when we first showed up with our camera crew, they had just begun their tour. And as you know, in the beginning of the tour, they're deliberately in the Midwest and smaller cities because everybody's working their yips out, not just the band, the lighting crew, the stage crew, everything's being worked out. Steven still had oak tags on the floor of the stage with some of the lyrics that he wanted to be reminded of and stuff. So it was very early in the tour. And I had no idea what I was walking into, but they were not happy that we were there when we showed up. So when we actually first got there,
which show were
this
you?
Is the Get a Grip tour.
And you were doing
a rockumentary for them on the Get a Grip tour. And as we showed up, I had I flew in these cameramen from California. They're among the best, and they're, very, excited to be filming. So the band comes on stage for a rehearsal after we first show up, and the crew starts to film them while they're rehearsing. And I could see all of a sudden in the middle of the rehearsal, and it wasn't very long into it, Steven grabs the fire pole that has that little quick getaway into his dressing area below stage, and he spins around and kicks at the cameraman's camera extremely close, like, whoa, and he disappears and abruptly ends the rehearsal. And so that was my first clue that things weren't really cool, Anyway, we set up for the taping of the concert, and all of a sudden the manager comes up to me and he goes, okay, you get to record the first two songs and the encore. And I said to him, it was Tim Smith. I was like, Tim, I didn't fly out here with this camera crew to film 3 songs. Are you kidding me? We had a couple of dates with them, a couple of cities. So, but that was the deal. And so the way that I kind of got around it was I actually said to the audio guy, I said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to have the audio cart with the monitor and the speakers set up outside the dressing room door, literally 5 feet in front of the door. The minute that the concert's over, I want our footage playing back in that monitor outside their door. And sure as hell, they all came out immediately as soon as they saw that the concert was being played back, and they all stood there to watch. And the first thing that happened was Joey, the drummer, who has a history of, let's just say, therapy, to be nice. He says to the cameraman, hey, you didn't shoot me. And the cameraman was like, yeah, no, I got you. I was shooting you. And no, you didn't shoot me at all. You never even came over and shot me. And they started bickering, and I stepped in between them, and I said, no, I said, listen, Joey is right. You didn't shoot him. Certainly not enough. And then I turned to Joey and I said, but Joey, you have to be ready for him to stand on your riser, be right behind your back, stick his camera under your cymbals. Can you handle that? And he's like, yeah. And from the corner of my eye, I can see Steve and Joe looking at me like, far out. He's kind of handling Joey. You know what I mean? So then I walk over to the monitor, and Joe Perry's watching the footage playback, and he says, not bad, not too bad. And I said, I would have liked to have recorded "Walk On Down," which is a song that Joe had written on the album, Joe Perry. And he goes, yeah, is that what you would have liked? And I said, no, actually, that's wrong. I would have liked to have shot the whole concert, like the reason why I came out. And he said, oh, okay. He goes, well, if you want to shoot the whole concert, you could do it tomorrow night. And I was like, really? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, okay, good. He's like, good. Now, the thing is, I got to give a shout out to my buddy Rob Barnett, who is my associate
Great
producer.
guy, great guy.
Yeah. And he does send his regards to you, by the way, because I spoke to him the other day.
I don't like him that much.
He was he was my associate producer, but to be honest with you, Rob had a huge career in radio before he worked at MTV, and he went on to become the general manager of Xfinity Radio. So he's no small fry. And even though he was my associate producer, he was the one who said to me, Pete, remember, Aerosmith thinks they're the American Rolling Stones. And so he said, if you really think about it and think about it in that way, it would pay off for you to see if they would agree to do a small nightclub performance, just like the Rolling Stones do every time before they go out on tour. They take over a small rock club, they lock the doors, lock everybody in, and they play and they get their yips out and they, do what they want to do. So I had the ability to go and locate a place in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, 1 mile away from the arena, called the Pomp Room. And that Pomp Room had about 300 person capacity, and they had a national recording act playing in that room that night. And I had worked it out with the owner of the bar and the band on just the chance that Aerosmith would agree to play there, that they would be ready for us. So just by chance, right before the concert, at 1 hour before the concert, Tim Smith, the manager, brings me into the dressing room and splits. And I am alone with the band. And they're all sitting there. And Joe Perry says to me, hey, man, we have been working for 3 weeks straight. Tomorrow is our first day off, and we're supposed to be spending it with you. So what are we doing? So the first thing I said to him was, hey, there's a race car track here, nearby, and a GM dealership with Corvettes. I know you all collect Corvettes. Why don't we go get some Corvettes, and we'll have a day at the races with Aerosmith. You can race each other, and we'll have some fun. And Brad, the bass player, right away, he goes, yeah, that's great, And then Joe Perry says, nah, that's Motley Crue. That's not us. So now I'm getting the whole taste of the whole situation. They really want the day off, essentially. So I go, look, there's a nightclub 1 mile away. There's a national band, a recording artist there with great equipment. If you guys agree to go into this bar after the concert tonight and play one set, anybody who doesn't want to talk to me tomorrow or spend time with me tomorrow doesn't have to. And of course, that's Steve and Joe, right? Because they're the ones who are overexposed. And so right away, Steve Tyler goes, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it, And Joe says, hey, Steve, we're just beginning the concert, the tour, you're going to blow your voice out. And he says, no, don't worry about it. Let's do it. So we went down there with a guitar tech and a drum tech, and we got all the equipment set up the way that they needed it and brought it back to the band. They were really excited about it. You could see that they were excited about it. They played a full concert, and then right after the concert, they jumped in the limos with their guitarists. We went there, and it was really cool because the entrance to the stage was an exposed staircase that came right down along the back wall. So we locked the front doors. The band came down the front stage. People's minds were just blown. People were going crazy. The band went on. They had the best time ever playing all the songs they can't play in concert because they have to play the hits, right? So now you're getting Toys from the Attic, and you're getting all these great songs that they never get a chance to play. 300 people in that bar. Many of them didn't make it to the concert that night right down the road. And they got probably 45 minutes of, completely all in awesome performance from that band. They played just as hard as if they were in front of the arena crowd. And that's what makes Aerosmith one of the greatest bands I ever worked with, period.
Wow. Oh my God. There it is. There's the money shot.
Wow.
There's the hair.
Look at Pete with the rocket.
But they are truly the coolest guys. And just to let you know how cool they were, I got to know them during the wheatgrass years, right? They were all clean and sober and drinking vegetable juice before concert. And everything going on in the arena was dry concerning the band and everything. And the one night when they went on that one night to perform, all of a sudden we had a case of beer delivered back to the crew room. And one of the bodyguards came over and was like, "What the hell is this, man? These guys are dry. There's nothing going on. You can't have beer in here." And then we look at the note. Steven Tyler sent us a case of beer back there.
Oh, that's cool.
That's just how cool that guy is, man, because he knew just because he's dry, he was not going to force it on us. He bought us a case of beer. So, I mean, they're top-notch people, man.
That is so awesome.
Very cool. Very cool.
Thank you for sharing that. And John, Pete, both of you, thank you again for joining us. I'm sorry I held you guys in here so long, but you guys are both welcome back anytime you want. We'd love to have you. And
I'm honored to be on the show with all you guys, Tom, Frank, Mark, of course, and John. I'm a big fan of yours. I'm so happy to be here with you. It's really an honor.
Oh,
John, you're on mute. That's why he's usually really in front of the house.
I was just saying, Pete, it's so nice to see you. And apart from Mark, it's nice to see all of you. So thank you all for this. I really love hearing all the stories I heard. And this was, I had no idea what to expect. This is really fun. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I feel like we learned so much from both of you.
And also make sure we tune in next week to the town hall with little Steven.
That'll be airing on the Volume channel and the Progress channel. I will be promoting it on my socials once I know the dates of it all.
You know, as much as it pains me to compliment John Fugelsang,
I know it does.
He is the best interviewer that I've ever met face to face, that I've ever had the pleasure of working with. And I just want to throw this in as a comedy note. Mark, as storytellers go, you're probably the best storyteller, comedy storyteller on stage that I've ever seen, man. You're really good at that comedy.
Thank you, Frank. You're very good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Frank. And it's awesome pleasure having you on. And maybe we can coach you in the coming out tomorrow and hanging with us. We'll be having Don Jamieson. We're going to be talking about the Moscow Peace Fest that Pete was part of, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Anytime Richie can't do it, I'm happy to be Tony Orlando and Barnum. You know what I mean? I'm happy to do that.
Please say hi to Don for me.
Well, I'll knock 3 times, and let's see if you'll show up.
We definitely.
Well, thanks, guys. I was really honored to be on with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Tom, you want to take us away?
Yeah, we appreciate everybody out there for checking us out. If you missed any of this interview, you can catch the full video interview on Drinks, Jokes, and Storytelling on YouTube, or you can listen to it anywhere where you listen to your podcast, Apple, iTunes, Spotify. And please make sure you give us that 5-star rating, push us up in the rankings, and we can have more incredible guests like Pete and John on. And thank you all for coming out with us tonight. And thank you to our guests. Thank you to everybody in the audience. We will see everybody tomorrow. Have a great one. Night.
Thank you.